Sarah Chen gripped the controls of her research vessel as the storm battered the small boat against the rocky coastline of Alaska's remote Kodiak Island. The marine biologist had been tracking unusual whale migration patterns when her equipment detected something extraordinary. A signal from the deep ocean that didn't match any known marine life. The signal had led her here, to these treacherous waters where few researchers dared to venture. Her partner, Jake Martinez, a former Navy diver turned underwater photographer, checked their diving equipment one final time. They had only a few hours before the weather would make any underwater exploration impossible. "The readings are getting stronger," Sarah called over the howling wind. "Whatever's down there, it's big and it's been there for a long time." Jake studied the sonar display, his weathered face showing concern. The object appeared to be a massive structure, perfectly geometric, resting on the ocean floor 300 feet below. It was far too regular to be natural rock formation, yet too old to be any known human construction. As they prepared for the dive, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Her grandmother had been an Inuit elder who spoke of ancient things beneath the ice, stories dismissed by modern science as folklore. But the signal patterns matched descriptions from those old tales almost perfectly. The first dive revealed carved stone passages filled with bioluminescent organisms, unlike anything in scientific literature. The creatures seemed to respond to their presence, creating flowing patterns of light that guided them deeper into the structure. Sarah documented everything, her camera capturing symbols etched into walls that predated known human civilization. Jake discovered chambers filled with crystalline formations that hummed with energy. When he touched one, the entire structure began to emit a low-frequency pulse that seemed to communicate across vast distances. Marine life from miles around began converging on their location, but their discovery had not gone unnoticed. A corporate research vessel appeared on the horizon, followed by military ships. Sarah realized that their equipment had been monitored, and powerful forces wanted to claim whatever lay beneath the waves. As they surfaced, Sarah clutched the memory cards containing proof of their discovery. The ancient structure below held secrets that could change everything scientists understood about early human history and marine ecosystems. But first, they had to survive long enough to share what they had found. The corporate ship moved to intercept them, its intentions clearly hostile. Sarah gunned the engine of their small research vessel, heading for the maze of rocky islands that only local knowledge could navigate safely. Behind them, the ocean began to glow with an otherworldly light as the ancient structure responded to the approaching threat. Jake grabbed the radio, trying to reach the Coast Guard, but all communications were being jammed. They were on their own, carrying knowledge that others would kill to possess or suppress. The chase had begun, and the stakes were higher than either researcher could have imagined. The storm that had threatened to end their expedition now became their ally, providing cover as they raced through channels between jagged rocks. But Sarah knew they couldn't run forever. They needed allies, and they needed to find a way to protect their discovery from those who would exploit it. As lightning illuminated the churning seas, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She would contact her grandmother's people, the Inuit elders who had preserved ancient knowledge for generations. If the stories were true, they might be the only ones who understood what had been awakened beneath the waves. The small research vessel disappeared into the storm-lashed archipelago, carrying with it secrets that had slept beneath the ocean for millennia. Behind them, corporate and military forces spread out across the waters, determined to claim a discovery that belonged to no single nation or company. The race to unlock the mysteries of the deep had begun, and Sarah Chen found herself at the center of a conflict that would test everything she believed about science, tradition, and the hidden history of the world. 3 days after escaping through the storm, Sarah and Jake found themselves in a remote Inuit village, guests of Sarah's grandmother's cousin, Elder Thomas Kanguk. The old man studied the photographs and recordings they had brought, his weathered face grave with recognition. "The sleeping guardians," he whispered in Inuktitut before switching to English. "My grandfather warned this day would come when the ice melted enough to wake them." Thomas explained that the structure was one of several built by an advanced civilization that had flourished in the Arctic before the last ice age. When climate change threatened their world, they had created these underwater sanctuaries, placing themselves in suspended animation to preserve their knowledge until the world was ready to learn from their mistakes. The crystalline formations Jake had touched were bioengineered organisms, part of a vast network that monitored ocean health across the planet. The signal they had detected was a warning system, activated when pollution and warming reached critical thresholds. Meanwhile, corporate security teams led by former military operative Victoria Stone had traced Sarah and Jake to the region. Stone worked for Titan Industries, a conglomerate that wanted to weaponize the advanced technology hidden in the underwater structures. They had been monitoring unusual oceanic signals for months, waiting for someone to lead them to the source. Sarah learned that similar signals had been detected near underwater structures off the coasts of Peru, Ireland, and Japan. Ancient sites that local indigenous populations had protected with myths and taboos, keeping modern civilization away from technologies they weren't ready to handle responsibly. Elder Thomas gathered representatives from other indigenous groups around the Arctic Circle. Through encrypted satellite communications, they coordinated with tribal leaders worldwide who had been guardians of similar sites. The awakening was happening globally, and ancient protocols needed to be activated. Jake discovered that his naval background made him valuable in ways he hadn't expected. The suspended beings in the structures communicated through bioelectric fields that his military training in underwater electronics helped him interpret. They weren't hostile, but they were deeply concerned about the state of the oceans they had been monitoring. Sarah worked with indigenous scientists to decode the warning systems. The data revealed that ocean acidification and warming were approaching tipping points that would trigger massive ecosystem collapses within decades. The ancient civilization had faced similar challenges and developed sustainable technologies that could reverse the damage. But accessing this knowledge required proving that modern humanity was ready to use it wisely. The structures would only fully activate if representatives from both scientific and indigenous communities worked together, bridging the gap between technological advancement and traditional wisdom. Victoria Stone's team closed in on the village, supported by corporate lawyers claiming salvage rights to any underwater discoveries. They brought deep-sea extraction equipment designed to remove artifacts by force, regardless of the environmental consequences. Thomas revealed that the village had been preparing for this confrontation for generations. Hidden beneath the community center was a control room built by his ancestors, connected to the underwater network through fiber optic cables disguised as natural rock formations. Sarah realized that her grandmother had guided her research toward this moment. The whale migration patterns she had been studying were actually the marine mammals responding to signals from the awakening guardians, nature itself preparing for the revelation of ancient knowledge. The corporate ships arrived just as the Indigenous Council completed their preparations. Stone's team deployed underwater robots toward the structure, but the Guardians responded by activating defensive systems that had protected their sanctuaries for millennia. Jake volunteered to return to the underwater structure, this time with proper protocols provided by the elders. His mission was to establish formal contact with the Guardians and convince them that at least some of modern humanity was ready to learn from their wisdom. As he descended into the glowing depths, Sarah coordinated surface operations with indigenous leaders worldwide. They were activating a network that had remained dormant for thousands of years, preparing to share technologies that could heal the damaged oceans. But Stone's forces weren't giving up easily. They launched a full assault on the village, determined to seize control of the Guardian technology before it could be shared with the world. The battle between ancient wisdom and corporate greed was about to reach its climax beneath the storm-tossed waters of the Arctic Ocean. The fate of both the oceans and humanity's future hung in the balance as old knowledge awakened to face new threats. Sarah found herself serving as a bridge between two worlds, fighting to ensure that the gifts of an ancient civilization would be used to heal rather than exploit the planet they all called home. Deep beneath the Arctic waters, Jake found himself in a vast chamber filled with bioluminescent beings who had slept for 12,000 years. The Guardians appeared human-like, but with adaptations for underwater life, their skin containing the same light-producing organisms that illuminated their sanctuary. Through bioelectric communication, they shared their story with Jake. Their civilization had once thrived across the planet, developing technologies that worked with natural systems rather than against them. When their industrial expansion triggered climate change, they chose preservation over destruction, entering suspended animation until the world could benefit from their hard-learned wisdom. The Guardians revealed that Earth's oceans were connected by a vast bioengineered network of organisms that maintained chemical and thermal balance. This network had been failing for decades as pollution and warming overwhelmed its capacity to adapt. Without intervention, the system would collapse within 20 years, causing mass extinction. Surface warfare erupted as Stone's corporate forces clashed with indigenous defenders and their unexpected allies. Environmental activists, marine biologists, and Coast Guard personnel had rallied to protect the site after leaked footage of the Guardian structures went viral worldwide. The battle became a symbol of humanity's choice between exploitation and stewardship. Sarah worked frantically in the underground control room, coordinating with similar facilities that had been secretly maintained by indigenous communities on every continent. The global Guardian network was activating simultaneously, overwhelming corporate and governmental attempts to suppress the revelation. The Guardians provided Jake with biotechnology that could rapidly heal damaged ocean ecosystems. Living organisms that consumed plastic pollution, converted carbon dioxide into harmless compounds, and restored acidified waters to healthy pH levels. But these gifts came with conditions. Humanity would need to prove its commitment to environmental protection through actions, not just words. The technology would only function if operated jointly by scientific and indigenous communities, ensuring that traditional wisdom guided its application. Corporate exploitation would cause the organisms to become inert. Elder Thomas revealed the final piece of the puzzle. His people had been more than just guardians of knowledge. They were descendants of the ancient civilization, carrying genetic markers that allowed them to interface with Guardian biotechnology. Sarah's grandmother had recognized similar markers in her granddaughter's DNA. As Jake began his ascent with samples of Guardian biotechnology, Stone made a desperate attempt to destroy the structure rather than lose control of it. Her team deployed explosive charges around the sanctuary's foundation, threatening to bury both the Guardians and their knowledge forever. The Guardians responded by awakening fully, their collective consciousness reaching out through the bio-network to marine life worldwide. Whales, dolphins, and other sea creatures converged on corporate vessels, using echolocation to disable equipment. The ocean itself seemed to be fighting back. Sarah discovered she could interface directly with the Guardian network through her genetic inheritance. She felt the pain of dying coral reefs, the struggle of marine animals choking on plastic, and the desperate signals sent by ecosystems on the brink of collapse. But she also felt hope, the network's incredible capacity for healing if given the chance. The explosive charges detonated, but instead of destroying the structure, they triggered an ancient defense system. The sanctuary rose from the ocean floor, breaking the surface as a massive bioarchitectural marvel that defied conventional engineering. Guardian technology had been designed to survive even planetary catastrophes. Jake emerged from the depths carrying living samples that began immediately transforming the polluted waters around them. Oil slicks dissolved into harmless organic compounds. Plastic debris was consumed by organisms that converted it into nutrients for marine life. The ocean began healing itself in real time. Stone's corporate forces found their equipment mysteriously failing as guardian organisms infiltrated their systems. The beings had learned to defend themselves against exploitation through 12 millennia of observation. Their biotechnology simply refused to function for those who would misuse it. Global governments scrambled to respond as similar guardian structures emerged from ocean floors worldwide. Traditional knowledge keepers stepped forward to serve as translators between human civilization and the awakened guardians, fulfilling roles their ancestors had prepared them for across countless generations. Sarah stood on the deck of the risen sanctuary, watching as the Arctic waters transformed from polluted gray to crystalline blue. Schools of fish returned to areas they had abandoned decades ago. The aurora borealis danced overhead with unusual intensity, responding to the bioelectric fields of the Guardian network. The Guardians offered humanity a second chance, partnership in healing the planet rather than dominion over it. Their technology could reverse climate change, restore ecosystems, and provide sustainable energy for human civilization. But only if humanity chose cooperation over competition, wisdom over exploitation. Jake documented the transformation with his cameras, capturing footage that would inspire a generation to choose environmental stewardship over corporate profit. The images showed a possible future where human technology worked in harmony with natural systems, guided by the wisdom of both ancient knowledge and modern science. Victoria Stone faced investigation for her attacks on the Guardians, but her corporate masters quickly distanced themselves as public opinion shifted dramatically toward environmental protection. The Guardian revelation had changed everything, making cooperation with indigenous communities essential for accessing life-saving technologies. Elder Thomas smiled as he watched young people from around the world arriving to learn from the Guardians. His people's long vigil was ending successfully. The ancient knowledge was finally being shared with a humanity ready to receive it, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Sarah accepted her role as a bridge between worlds, helping to establish new institutions where scientific research and traditional wisdom guided the application of Guardian technology. The last signal had become the first communication in a new partnership between humanity and the ocean, offering hope for a sustainable future for all life on Earth.